So the polymorphic elastegrity will be an example of how you get from art to math. And this is a structure that has 8 asymmetrical tetrahedra suspended on 12 hinges, elastic hinges. I've presented this before at Gathering for Garner 12. There's a path of monododecahedra that Professor Bansov, who collaborated, defines a polyhedra, that dodecahedra that have congruent but not necessarily regular faces. At 13, I looked at geometry of motion in relation to 13 axes. 14, we looked at the tetradecahedron, which is 14-sided polyhedra as a void in creating the Wheran-Phelan polyhedral approximation of bubbles. So now we're going to look at the art skills for solving problems by looking at, as an example, the 15 polymorphisms of the polymorphic elastegrity. As Picasso said, Pablo Picasso, I have horror of people who speak about the beautiful. What is the beautiful? One that speaks of problems in painting. And this is true in architecture even more. So in architecture school, they gave us 2 art exercises from the Bauhaus that resulted in the structure. The first was inspired by Annie Albers, who believed in using simple rules to create complexity. She said in knitting, you can only put over or under the thread, and you get a big variety. Well, they gave us the close packing spheres to knit with 3-dimensionally that can be done with applicator sticks that can represent the close packing spheres, the 2 ways of close packing. Josef Albers was inspired the second exercise, that material, the properties of material, give rise to design. As Louis Kahn, the architect, said, he looked at the brick and I asked the brick, what do you want to become? And the brick said, I like an arts. Well, I asked the paper what you like to become, and the paper said, I like a diamond. So I made a paper diamond that it turns out Robert O'Neill had done earlier, and Mitchell independently later, and a few others. But they named it different things. By calling it diamond, I was stuck with the problem. It's not one thing, but grows. So I embarked into a multi-decade exploration of growing paper crystals. And in one experiment, I needed a 2-square triangle, and I made a slit to try something else. And that gave me these little squares, crosses of squares that wove into a flaccid structure that only later I made it again and flipped it inside out. So the polymorphic elastegrity, as soon as I had it, I continued experimenting what one can do with it. So the 6 papers that were woven into the 3 intersecting squares that were flaccid can also be made into C-shape and be woven into a cube with slits on the faces. The polymorphic elastegrity then can be, you can crush the tetrahedra and make this triradiational, that's a term I found, for groups of triangles that can flatten into a square. And by flipping the corners up, you can make a cube that turns into, by unfolding under the flaps, the triangles, you get the hypercube. The cube with the slits can be squeezed in the corners and open, so the vertices line up in a regular dodecahedron, but it needs glue, it's too unstable. So we added extra folds that you see here, and we counted, and we had made 12 pentagons, 20 triangles, and 40 squares, which is the Archimedean rhombic icosododecahedron that I guess even today mathematicians appreciate it. You can see it here in John Horton's Conway's office hanging from the ceiling. Tomorrow we're going to build all of them to make a mobile that you see here. So if you want to join us, and thank you for the attention.